sibilance.
That's wonderful. We've begun recording. Will you let us know your name, please?
Larry Masterman.
And how did we come to find each other there?
It's one of the great mysteries of our time.
I understand
Your mom knew
my
somebody.
Mom. Right. So you were presenting yesterday along with Eric Dittmer. Am I pronouncing that right?
Correct.
Who I'll be reaching out to later. And my mother was so inspired by what you had to say, I had to come check it out. Will you tell us a little bit about what it is that you do, actually?
I'm the Emergency Management Coordinator for the City of Medford.
And most recently, your topic at the Rotary Club, which brings us together, was tsunami and earthquake preparedness. Am I correct?
Correct.
And you just returned from a summit.
I returned from a 10-day study in Japan of the 2011 earthquake and tsunami.
Okay. And was that part of your presentation to the...
Yes, it was.
Would you like to...
I took about 700 photos while I was there, and so a number of those photos were in the presentation, and it was an amazing visit to Japan, even 6 years after the big earthquake and tsunami. There's a lot to be learned, and we here on the Oregon, Washington coast are at risk of a similar earthquake and tsunami to the one that laid Japan low 6 years ago.
And was that part of the reason why you went as well? Was it part
Yes.
of the studies for here?
Yes, it was. I mean, I happened to be interested in that. I went at my own expense, but so the taxpayers were off the hook.
Thank you.
But it was definitely a well-spent hit on the piggy bank.
Can you, at this point, you're welcome to just go free for all and tell me your favorite hot buttons and things that you want people to know. If they don't listen 30 minutes into the whole thing, what would be something you'd like them to start picking up on?
Well, anybody especially in the western half of Washington or Oregon or far northern California is at risk of a large earthquake along the Cascadia subduction zone. It's just off our shore. It runs about 600 miles long, and any of us could get clobbered. The last major earthquake from that fault was on January 26th of 1700, and geologists now tell us that we're 10 months pregnant in terms of when the next one might come. Mm-hmm. When a geologist tells you that, you know, their idea of the blink of an eye is a little different than most of us, but they say we're due. Some say we're overdue for another earthquake of that magnitude. And we're looking at a 9 magnitude earthquake that may last 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. The earthquake in Japan in 2011 was magnitude 9, and it created the tsunami that inundated over 400 square miles of coastal Japan with the sea, cost over 22,000 lives, destroyed 300,000 buildings, including fire stations and police stations and things like that. So we're at risk of the same type of major event. And so the study there in Japan was all about how they responded, what they've done to recover since then, and the lessons that we could bring back to our own communities.
Can you share with us some of those lessons?
Can I what?
Share with us some of those lessons.
Certainly. A few of the lessons that we heard over and over in our travels there were their plans weren't realistic. They weren't adequate for a tsunami of that size. They call this a 1,000-year tsunami. Mm-hmm. And their preparations had been for a magnitude 8 earthquake, and it was bigger than that. And then the tsunami was bigger than that. And so our plans have to be realistic. They let us know that their early warning systems weren't effective. And some of that was because people heard, oh, we're going to have a tsunami. We'll go to the same place we've always gone when we have a tsunami. And it was larger than what they were used to. So if they thought they were safe on the 3rd floor of a building, for this one that wasn't the case. Or they didn't evacuate far enough inland or high enough on the ground. Another big lesson was, and this is a question that I asked over and over of the different experts that we talked with. We had fire chiefs and mayors and emergency managers and university professors teaching us for our time there. And some of them let us know outright, but many of them, I'd say, so what is the biggest lesson we can take home? And they all said, run away. Just know when it's time to escape. You're not going to be able to fight this. You're not going to be able to really build to eliminate the risk. So you need to know when to just run away. And you need to be able to notify the public that it's time to just run away and where they can go where they're genuinely safe. That's huge. Smaller communities were more at risk than larger communities, and that comes as no surprise. They have more modest budgets and other priorities. They don't have the resources to throw at preparedness and construction and things like that. So I think about coastal Oregon and Northern California, coastal Washington. Most of those are smaller communities, very much at risk of something similar. As of right now, the total estimated cost of the response and the recovery to date is $360 billion US. And that's a tough nut to crack for any jurisdiction or any government. That's a huge price tag. So that's another lesson. Another lesson was there are some cultural differences. In Japanese culture, people don't take quite as much initiative if they don't have authority, and in some cases that proved to be disastrous. There was a school where the principal was out for the day, and the people left behind in charge were reluctant to order an evacuation and to deviate from the usual plan and evacuate further away. So because of that delay, they had 72 grade school children get swallowed by the sea. They didn't stay put. They finally decided to evacuate, but it was too late. And I think we have in our culture probably more initiative in most places, but our people need to be empowered to make a decision and carry it out when safety's at risk, especially when they're charged with the safety of our kids, our vulnerable adults, and many other people like that. So that's a few.
And actually, those are great segues. I'm going to go in reverse order if I can remember them. Typically, my right hand is free to take notes. Speaking of taking initiative for safety, I assume that, maybe I shouldn't assume, that communities all across this affected zone, which is a rather, how many hundreds of miles is that, Washington and Northern California?
Well, the whole Cascadia subduction zone is over 600 miles long. It goes from Mendocino County, California, all the way to British Columbia.
It brought to mind immediately to me when Coos County recently put, God bless their little hearts, a little community measure forward, a Citizens' Bill of Rights, specifically trying to protect industry and infrastructure that would come into that particular area that might be deemed an environmental risk beyond what we could possibly prepare for, i.e. an LNG terminal was what the Jordan Cove pipeline project. And I'm wondering, what do you know of the communication around just that specific area as far as, I'm trying to think of how to phrase it.
Well, I can tell you, I don't know anything specific about any of the coastal communities individually.
Okay, very good. I'm going to be reaching out to a couple of them to see what their findings have been, what organizations they're working with to stay up on that. But I know they were speaking to that as a citizen's concern, like, hey, we know this is a problem. They're sharing the pictures right at the site where they're projecting the project. It says the tsunami zone. There's the community warning sign right there, and we're all wondering, okay, how do we bring this to light? This is a real thing.
Sure. How about the folks that have decided, what is it, Gold Beach, that they've decided to build the hospital, a new hospital in the inundation zone?
Mm-hmm. We're trying to raise our voice to that. So today you're starting at least the dialogue to get other citizens interested, not just in our area, but in our region. Because it certainly would affect, a landslide on the 101 happens about once a year, and that's just a fun landslide after a pretty standard issue rain.
I used to live in Pacifica, California, near a place called Devil's Slide that slid all the time, and sometimes it meant for months at a time, people, if they needed to get from south of that slide to San Francisco, they had an hour-and-a-half detour.
Yeah.
And that was the best they could do. Yeah, that's our reality anywhere along coastal highways.
So on the hypothetical side, not a political answer, but mostly just if we're talking about general safety and what seems reasonable, how do you see a natural gas terminal crossing this Cascadia subduction zone, if I pronounced that correctly?
You pronounced it correctly. I don't know. I don't have the expertise. I know there are engineering methods, there are devices that are intended to make pipelines survive earthquakes better than they have in the past. Kobe earthquake would be a good case study. And what has Japan done since then, because they had some serious issues with pipelines. San Francisco in 1989, we had the Loma Prieta earthquake. I was on duty in San Francisco for that. And I was the paramedic captain on duty, so ended up in command of all of the EMS and medical response. And the entire hydrant water system for San Francisco fire was out of action. And when we had the big fire fed by a gas leak in the Marina District, the only way they were able to get quantities of water on it was to pump it from the bay with a fireboat that I understand at that time was for sale by the city. Somebody had decided it's not cost effective, let's sell the boat. They hadn't sold it yet. And that was the only one they had. Now they have 3. They just took delivery of a brand new one that I think cost something like $30 million. You know, I understand there are technologies to make pipelines and their other infrastructure more survivable, but I'm not an expert on that subject.
Going back to what you were saying, do you have, you know what, walk us through. Let's say we get the 8 and 9. What does that look like on an Oregon coastline with the sand and the coastline as we know it? What is, paint us a picture?
The earthquake itself is likely to raise havoc with the coastal highways and the roads that lead inland, the bridges, whatnot. Any of the unreinforced masonry buildings are vulnerable. That's basically your standardized brick buildings. Mm-hmm. Anything built more than 30 years ago is probably not going to survive intact. The earthquake itself is going to be devastating. It may last 4 or 5 minutes. That's a long time to be duct covered and held on under your desk or things like that. Some of the schools are older. So, you know, there's a challenge there. So when the shaking does stop after 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, and people are, we hope they're thinking, okay, we're at risk of a tsunami, we need to get out of here, they'll have minutes of warning before the tsunami. With Japan's big earthquake in 11, we had hours of warning because it was so far away, but this will be closer. So we may have, you know, maybe 10 or 15 minutes of warning. So as people are trying to move inland and up, there are communities like Seaside that are, you know, there's no high ground that close. So people are having to travel further. And if everybody's trying to go in their car, what happens? So you're going to have a lot of people presumably stopped in cars waiting to move when that tsunami hits. So that's a challenge. Some of what I didn't expect to learn from the Japan example was the tsunami waves. The second one was actually taller than the first. And they were as much as 30 and 40 feet high. So as high as a 4-story building. And they carried with them everything that they'd picked up. In one city, they'd had a forest of 70,000 pine trees. One was left standing. The other 70,000 pine trees became battering rams. And the cars and the boats and the chunks of buildings and all these other things that were picked up by the sea were battering rams for the structures that were in the way. So we can expect that. And some of those structures may be our hospitals and our schools and other essential facilities, maybe fire stations and police stations. So we have that. When this is all over, and people haven't been able to get very far inland from the coast because of those 2-lane highways, we have a tough time keeping them open every winter. So we can't expect them to be intact. The Oregon Department of Transportation has developed a seismic triage program. They're sorting out which should get their first priority to have traffic restored, but that's a very long process. So people may be isolated. They want to get away from the coast, but they can't by any of the usual routes. The people that have horses or the people who can walk will be in better shape. The folks that can hunker down where they are, if they can get to higher ground, if they have emergency kits, they have the provisions they need, they have safe drinking water, they have protection from the elements, things like that, they may have to live off of those for a long time. And so we may be isolated in those coastal communities. According to the Oregon Resilience Plan, we may be isolated for weeks or months before assistance can get there. So how much drinking water do you have? Do you have a personal filter so you can drink the water you find without getting sick? Do you have enough food to get by? Do you have any of your other needs if you take medications, things like that? So we're going to see a lot of people with tremendous need after that earthquake and after that tsunami, and we're not going to have the resources to meet all their needs. So those people that are self-sufficient, that have planned for that, that have taken steps, they'll be in better shape than others.
Which is part of what I understand your work is to do, is to help people be aware that they need to be prepared, and then
absolutely
find resources. Or where would you, so they've watched you, oh my gosh, I need to know more, where's the next place?
There's so much good information. Ready.gov has a lot. That's a FEMA website. The Red Cross provides kits and training and all kinds of materials. People's local emergency management offices. It may be an Office of Emergency Services or an Office of Emergency Management. If they don't know where to look for that, in most counties, the Sheriff's Department does it. There are exceptions, but if they start there, there's a lot of great information on the web that can direct them. And there are a lot of things that people can do even if they can't afford to spend a lot of money on it. One of the most popular presentations I give is how to build a kit on a budget, and that often involves a trip to a Goodwill or to a dollar store, and just keeping in mind what can I find cheap that'll help me with my kit. And it might be, cans of tuna, 2 for $1, drinking water, first aid supplies, things like that. So those folks that are prepared, ideally, we want people to be prepared to look after their own needs and their family needs. If they can, after that, look out for their neighborhood and maybe their larger community. But there's a lot of good information out there for that.
I've gotten a chance to see a couple of presentations, and I was really pleased, and I'll encourage the viewers of this to click on that and share it with their relatives, so that it's dinner table conversation, and
wonderful.
We'll bring some awareness. Can you direct me any place else? Video goes a long way. If anything you might think I should make sure people see that's important.
Sure. Oregon Public Broadcasting a couple of years ago did a wonderful program called Oregon Unprepared. That's available on their website, and there's an hour-long documentary that is really eye-opening. But if people don't have that much time or that much attention span, there's about a 6-minute teaser that I often use when I'm talking with community groups. That's enough to get people to sit up and pay attention and think, okay, maybe I should set aside an hour to watch the whole thing. But it's a lot of really good information in a well put together package by OPB, Unprepared, on the OPB, Oregon Public Broadcasting website.
Oh, fantastic. We'll be going there next.
Okay.
Wonderful. Besides sharing this information and reaching out to your office and flooding your phone lines.
Once.
What's the takeaway for us? What would you like the viewers to do to help you, to help those that are trying to help us?
Be self-sufficient. the single most important thing anyone can do is to take care of themselves and, as I said, their family, their community, their neighborhood. We don't want people to have to call 911 because they need drinking water or to find out where they can get first aid supplies. We want people to be able to do those things on their own. We will, to the best of our ability, push out information to inform and empower people about what they can do in the emergency. But if they don't have water, they don't have food, they don't know how to turn off the gas in their house if they smell gas, we can't overcome that. So get informed, get prepared, get a kit. As I've said, there's lots of great training out there. And when people see, FEMA still says be prepared for 72 hours. Oregon has adopted a 2-week standard. We want people to be prepared. We call it 2x4. Be prepared for the first 2 minutes. In that earthquake, duck cover and hold on. Don't get hit on the head by a piece of the room you're in. Or if it's a fire, get out of your house, things like that. That first 2 minutes. The first 2 hours, if there's water running, if there's fire, get out. If you've had a serious earthquake, you're in a coastal community, don't wait for an alert to move to higher ground. Do that right now. So that first 2 hours. First 2 days, drinking water, essential. Drinking water and shelter from the elements will be the things that keep you alive for those first couple of days. Most of us can get by without food for many days unless we have a metabolic problem like diabetes or something like that. And then that 2 weeks is food, medical supplies, those kinds of things that are going to be essential for keeping you, not only keeping you alive for 2 weeks, but keeping you nourished and hydrated enough that you can make good decisions and you can take care of yourself. You have to have the strength to be able to move. You need to be able to make good decisions, have good sound judgment. And if you're dehydrated or you're starving, you don't have that.
And
be self-sufficient.
You're under a ton of adrenaline, which is known to have an effect on decision-making skills.
And after a while, the adrenaline will go away. And then every time there's an aftershock, the adrenaline will come again. But even when the adrenaline goes and you have the shakes and whatnot, you have to have your wits about you. There's some very nice pocket guides or guides that are small enough to plop into your kit that can help you remember things. They're not going to teach you how to survive an emergency, but they can provide checklists about here's how to check your house, here's how to turn off your gas or turn off your water if you have to do that. We don't want people to automatically turn off their gas. Turn it off only if you smell gas. Otherwise, leave it alone. Otherwise, it may be weeks before the gas company can come and turn it back on. So if that's your source of heat and that lets you cook a meal, leave it alone. But if you smell gas, turn it off. Everyone should know how to do that for their home. I'll give you one of these little guides before you go, so you can see the kind of thing I'm talking about.
Is our Oregon standard? Like this is just where we are at all times.
Oregon has adopted a 2x4 program that we're trying to get the citizens to understand.
That's awesome. I'll make sure I spread that. Specific to the massive incident that we were talking about earlier that we're due for, as we say, that you expressed might even be as long as 30 to 60 days-ish. I mean, it could be really...
The state resilience plan says weeks or months.
Okay.
And so it depends on where you are and how they can get to you. A few days after the earthquake, the coastal communities might be a little better off than those inland because they'll be able to be served by ships and the Navy will be there, the Coast Guard can help out. Those folks more inland here in the Rogue Valley, if we can't move north and south on I-5 because of bridges and overpasses and other problems with that, and we can't move east and west because those 2-lane roads are damaged or destroyed, even in, the whole thing doesn't have to be gone. If 50 feet of highway is impassable, the highway is impassable. So yeah, we just, be ready to be on your own with your neighbors, with the people who are in your community for a long time, and understanding that it may be weeks or months before the cavalry can get there to help.
Well, we're Oregonians. We're used to hanging out in nature. This one would be a little different.
Yeah, but the last Oregonians to have an earthquake like this died 300 years ago, so.
I do.
They were really tough Oregonians. The original Oregonians, they held up okay.
I have a couple more minutes with you, and that was the perfect way to go with it. So here's what happened. I'm just a layperson. I'm trying to speak to my friends in general, just about the reality of that. We've known about it for some time. It kind of falls into the panic attack conspiracy theory file of, oh,
well, don't get me started about chemtrails.
And then we get packed in with, well, we're a self-sufficient bunch. That's what we do, et cetera, et cetera. And I haven't found the message yet to marry it between the extreme alert, I'd like you to be aware of it, and not go into shock so you tune out the message. Somewhere in the middle, there's going to be a catchphrase. Have you heard one yet that helps get it across the kitchen table or the water cooler at work to get past the word tsunami?
That's one of the biggest challenges for the people who do what I do, the people in emergency management, is finding that middle ground for any group, and it varies from one group to another. We don't want to make light of something and have people think either, oh, it won't be that bad or it won't happen here, and that happens a lot. We don't want people to think, well, when this happens, I'll call 911 and the government will be here to help me. That's not realistic in a situation like this. On the other hand, we don't want people to think it's hopeless, so there's no point to me doing anything. We want folks to know that there's a lot they can do to prepare. And if they're prepared for that big earthquake and that tsunami, they're also prepared for the smaller emergencies. Oregon had a record winter, a lot of storms, a lot of issues. I've been stuck on I-5 2 winters ago. I was stuck on I-5 for 13 hours trying to go 1 mile. And nobody else around me was moving, but in my car I had a sleeping bag. So I was behind the wheel in a sleeping bag, didn't have to run the engine and burn gas to stay warm. I had food and water. So while some people are worrying if they're going to run out of gas and freeze to death, I was paying my bills and reading a magazine and that kind of thing. So if you're prepared for the big emergency, then you're really well prepared for those other emergencies. If the power went out at your home for 3 days or 5 days, how would that change your life? Well, that's happened to me, and people, they forget about what it's like when they can't just throw a switch. And so if people want to really find out how resilient they are and how self-sufficient they are, they should try camping in the backyard for a weekend with nothing. Take what you can carry to the backyard in one trip and live there for 2 days. And it's not fair to say, oh, I forgot my electric toothbrush, I'm going to run in the house and get it, or I really need to have that pot of hot coffee. Really, you don't have to go far away. Just show the discipline to just live in your backyard with what you could carry in one trip and see how that works, and you'll learn from that. My family's been evacuated twice for wildfires. We learned from that. So you don't have to have a catastrophe to learn how to deal with a catastrophe. And so anything you do to prepare is better than nothing at all.
I love that. 2 days in your backyard, have the discipline to get through it. That's actually quite a test. As you were saying it, I was thinking it through. What you said, oh, I forgot I'm hearing it now. I'm hearing it now. But nope, it's not going to happen. Okay.
Oh, the phone's ringing.
Incredibly practical advice, though. And you get through that frustration and anxiety with the safety around you of really still being able to go in your house.
Yeah.
Kind of puts a different light on it, and maybe hopefully people will listen to that and practice their 2-day camp out.
And then imagine what you would need to add to that to be able to get by for 14 days.
Precisely. And then plan accordingly.
Yeah.
And then tell your
And don't just plan. Act accordingly. Go to the dollar store. Go to the Goodwill store. Go to garage sales. You can get so much stuff for your emergency kit for a quarter.
Right.
At the garage sale,
Craigslist. We're huge on Craigslist in Oregon.
Stuff you can get for free.
Right.
I mean, I did some teaching at a casino one time. And they said, well, if you join the membership club, you get $10 in slot play and a deck of cards. Well, the deck of cards went in my emergency kit. It's just entertainment. Weighs almost nothing. Doesn't take a lot. There's a lot you can do with a deck of cards. And when your kids are crazy because they're bored, or whatever, just think about those things when you go into a hotel or a motel, and you got little shampoos and soaps and things like that. Pick up the extras. Put them in your emergency kit. Just if you think about that as you go about your daily life, you're going to find before you know it, you're going to need a bigger container for your kit because you found all this really cool, important stuff that'll keep you going when you have a crisis.
Thank you so much, Larry, for your time.
You're welcome.
I certainly appreciate it. Before I click off, anything you want to add?
Go Ducks.
Go Dogs. My OSU friends are going to freak out.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's only half the point.
I love it. All right, you take care. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.